This is Chris Horner. He rides for Radio Shack Nissan Trek, and he's joining us today from Bend. And we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. So I'm just going to get right to it here. You've got one more year left on your Radio Shack contract for next year.
Yes.
Do you think you would ever consider after that year to race in America again? Kind of like a Freddie Rodriguez?
Well, I don't know what I'm considering at the moment. Certainly, I have a contract for next year still. So I'll finish it, keep racing for Radio Shack. If the legs are good, then I'll stay in Europe. So I'm not really thinking about coming back and being a domestic racer anytime at the moment.
Okay. I was just curious if you ever would race back in America again on a team like that. What is left for you in 2012?
I have World Championships and then I have the Italian races. I believe Piemonte, I don't know the second one, and then Lombardy, of course, is the main objective. So World Championships and Lombardy are the two big ones, and then 2 races in between us.
Awesome. And are you looking for big results out of those races? And do you go into every race looking for a result?
Well, of course, you go to every race for the team to look for big results, but I had a week off the bike to recover. It was the first time I got a chance to get a little break after the Tour de France, because I had the Tour de France, the Olympics, Utah, Colorado, and so then I got a good little break after Colorado to relax. And then hopefully, of course, I've been at altitude this whole time since I left the Olympics. So hopefully when I head back to the World Championships with a little bit of rest, I'm hoping the form comes 100%. So yes, I'd like to go really good at the Worlds and use everything I got left in the tank for Lombardy.
Okay, that's good information. Tell me about 2012 when you're on this roller coaster. I read that your wife found out that you weren't going to be selected for the 2012 Radio Shack squad to be in the Tour de France, and she actually found out on the internet, and then it came back around where you ended up riding in the Tour de France. So what was that roller coaster like, and was that expected from a team like Radio Shack to kind of keep what I consider you're the #1 rider kind of in limbo, not knowing exactly what's going on?
Well, of course, every team functions differently. The main thing with this year, the 2004 for the Tour de France this year, basically was that I had the back problem after California, and so the team's biggest concern was just whether or not if the back had healed, and certainly there's been a lot of extra work and stress in the team with different problems, of course, management coming together, staff coming together, riders coming together. Fabian having a broken collarbone was a problem. Andy Schleck breaking his pelvis before the Tour de France. So there's a lot of stuff going on internally within the team, and so the communication just between myself and the team in general was not as high as it should have been, both on my part and on the team's part. But even on my part, should have been a lot more telephone calls to the team to let them know exactly where I was at. And so when they made the selection for the team, of course they wanted to make the selection from Dauphiné and from Tour of Swiss, but those weren't races that I could do because of the back problem. So for me, I was just training the whole time. And of course, not staying in constant, because I'm training in America, not training in Europe and not racing in Europe, you're out of touch with the team a lot when you're on a European team like this is. And so that caused a lot of extra problems with just making the selection for the Tour, because nobody could see me. Nobody could see me. The communication on the phone line and emails and stuff like that wasn't as great as it should have been. And so as I was training up to the Tour, it was definitely a little bit of stressful for me, just knowing whether or not if you're going to go to the Tour or not. Of course, professionally speaking, they pay me to ride my bike, and so I'm going to continue to ride my bike up until the Tour de France starts, with the ideal that of course there's always a possibility. So it didn't change a whole lot there, just changed with a little bit of the stress of knowing if you're going to go to the Tour for sure or not. And of course with Radio Shack and Nissan, both those sponsors that called me up and had told me that they would try to support and get me on the team and all that stuff. But so I had a lot of confidence through the sponsors that they wanted me to be there, and then it was just a matter of of trying to beg and plead my case to Johan and get on the team. And after a lot of phone calls and talking and conversations with Johan, I'm just showing him my SRAM file, showing him my training, telling him the back is good, reassuring him that I believe the back would hold up through the tour. And of course, with the back is no different than with somebody going in with a bad knee. I mean, you see riders drop out of the Tour de France because their knee gets damaged or crashed. You know, they crash, they hurt something, they drop out for that reason. And for me, instead of a knee problem, I have a back problem. So if it flares up, it could be something that keeps you out of the Tour de France. So not only do I have to convince the team now that I'm solid and I'm riding good and training good and that I'm at the fitness level to be at the Tour de France, but I also have to convince them that I don't believe that the back's going to be a problem during the tour either.
Okay. Well, let's keep on this subject. Johan, there's been some press where some guys like Contador and the Schlecks, maybe they do, maybe they don't, see eye to eye with him, maybe they like rating with him. But what I read from the media standpoint is, you know, that not all the guys like riding for him. What is your relationship like with him?
Well, mine's been very good, actually. So originally when I was hired on the team, I had come very close to riding with Rock Racing at the time. And I hadn't signed a contract with them. I don't know if I would have signed a contract, but I was at the point to where I was possibly coming back to be a domestic rider in the U.S., and it was Johan that called me up and saved the last minute, midnight telephone call to me and saved my European career and kept me racing in Europe. And so for that, I'm always appreciative. I find when he's in the car behind and when races that I'm a lot more motivated to perform well when you got manager, director, whatever you want to call him at that moment. Of course, he's the manager of the team, but during the race, then he would be the director of the team. So when you have someone of his caliber in the car, it always motivates you a little bit more to ride a little bit deeper. So I see the problems, of course, that Andy has and other riders have, but I haven't come across those. I've had a pretty good relationship with Johan, and even this year doesn't really rub me the wrong way of making the Tour de France or anything. I could see his issues with me and with the back problem of coming into the Tour de France, so I don't have any issues with that either. It was, for me, it's always been a really positive thing, and certainly I can see where the other riders are coming from too. There's been some confusing moments on the team with the mixture of the two staffs and management and riders all coming together this year than what we've had in the past, and so hopefully this next year gets ironed out a little smoother. But my experiences with Johan, especially one-on-one, has always been fantastic.
Great. I was always wanting to ask you about that. I'm going to take you back to Stage 7 in 2011. We all watched,
I only know as much as you guys watch, too.
Well, see, and this is why I want to talk to you, because I know you have kids, and I'm a dad, you're a dad. And, you finished that ride with a concussion, a broken nose, ribs, and you got back on your bike, and you've admittedly say you kept asking the guy that was next to you, how much farther, or how much longer, or when does this end, or whatever the conversation was. My question is if you found yourself, I know you're a pro bike rider, and I know it's, you guys are really gladiators out there on the bike, but would you do it again?
Yes.
And how does your
do it again? I wanted to do it that morning. They wouldn't let me start the next morning.
Well, I know that, but it was surreal for me.
That's what we do.
That's when I really knew I was a Chris Horner fan, because when I saw the video, I was like, man, forget about this race. I want to know how this guy is doing, generally speaking. And so I just kept checking because, it was very surreal for America to watch. But with kids on the line, and that's a pretty scary deal to go through. Do you ever think about that, being a dad?
The problem is when you have a head injury, and any athlete will tell you this, when you have a head injury, it's not like other injuries you have. When I broke my leg in the Giro, I crashed. We were doing a 120-mile stage. I crashed 20 miles into it. I rode 100 miles on a broken leg.
Wow.
I didn't know it was broken. I just knew it was painful, so I did it. And when you have a head injury, though, you don't know what you may or may not be doing. Okay, so certainly the day of the crash, I didn't know what was going on. That's clear from the photos and everything. The next morning the next morning in the hospital at 8:15 a.m. when I actually came through and the the light bulb in my head stayed on instead of flickering on and off like it was doing before. When it actually came on, and from then on I can remember those moments. The only thing I could think about at that moment was, and the team doctor was there. Dog is the team doctor. He spent the night with me in the hospital, make sure I was okay. Slept in the rollaway bed right next to mine in the hospital. And as soon as I mentally came through, as soon as I mentally, the light came on and stayed on, I said, Doug, let's go to the Tour de France. It's only 8:15 a.m. We can still make the stage. And so with a head injury, you don't, as far as I knew, the head injury is over. I mean, now I'm thinking right. I'm thinking normal, more or less, or I believe I am. We all know I wasn't. But at that moment, you believe you are because you're the one with the head injury. So you don't know that. But that's why you need an outside source, somebody that you trust, somebody that you believe in and have faith in. And for me, that person was Dog. And so I argued with Dog for about 10 or 15 minutes about him sneaking me out of the hospital so we could go to the start of the Tour de France. And after about 15 minutes, I realized that of course, Dog wasn't going to take me. And I also believed in Dog's opinion and respected his opinion to know that it was better to go home than it was to start the Tour de France stage. But if you would have left it up to me, I would have hopped in the car, drove to the stage, and jumped on my bike that morning.
Well, we're glad you got your rest. You won the Amgen Tour of California in 11, and you also won the Volta in 2010. Which was a bigger win?
I won the Basque Country. Yes. Yes, exactly.
Which one was a bigger win for you?
California is the bigger win for my career. The Basque Country is a bigger win for me personally. When I won in the Basque Country, it beat the #1 rider in the world, which was Alejandro Valverde, and the #1 rider that year was Joaquim Rodriguez, and he was there, and I beat him too. The guys who won stages during the Basque Country of that year was Valverde, Joaquim Rodriguez, Samuel Sanchez, and Oscar Freire. So those are the top 4 best riders in the world. Certainly, one was #1 ranked rider in the world, and one was going to be #1 ranked rider in the world. And so when I won the time trial on the last day to win the overall, I understand the quality of field that's at the Basque Country. And without a doubt, in terms of stage race riders, there's not a better quality race in the world in terms of the talented of riders that are there on form, except for the Tour de France. I mean, it's got a better group of GC riders than the Tour of Spain and than the Giro d'Italia, for sure, and better than the Dauphiné and better than the Tour of Swiss, and basically better than any other race in the world with the exception of the Tour de France. And all those GC riders are on form at that particular moment too, because we're all going to the Ardennes Classics the next week, which is Amstel, Flèche, and Liège. And so everybody's peaking for the Basque Country and they're peaking for the Classics. And so you know when you win in the Basque Country, you're beating the best GC riders in the world.
Huh. I'm going to take you for a throwback. I watched you in a movie years ago called Pro. And I think you were in Philadelphia riding in that race. Now, for a young guy, can you give a young guy any tips on how your career went from that to winning the Amgen Tour of California, and how much, like, what course did you take? Because when I looked at the Chris Horner then, it was totally different than a guy that I'm looking at now.
Well, I don't know about totally different, but certainly a little bit different in the diet, maybe a little bit more professional in the recovery and the rest and stuff like that. I mean, bike racing in my family is about all that I do. I don't have a whole lot of other hobbies because that takes up about everything, all my free time. And so certainly in the past, I would make more room. Maybe the diet wasn't as good, of course. The weight was a few pounds heavier, some small little tweaks here and there, of course. And certainly in the past, maybe the weight would get close to what it is now, but not exactly, maybe 2-3 pounds heavier or something. So at moments, my form in the past would be where it is now, but I couldn't hold it for as long as I can now. And so those things have changed. But mainly when you're a young pro, I think the biggest thing I always like to tell young pros is you got to know your limitations. You have to know your limitations on how much training you can handle. You have to know your limitations on what you're capable of doing in the bike race. You have to know your limitations on how much rest you take, so you don't take too much rest. And so there's really, for me, I really find limitations as being, as long as you know where your limitations are. If you need 2 weeks to be ready for the World Championships, then you better not rest for a few days longer and only have a week and a half. And so those limitations go to everything. Limitations can be the amount of calories you eat that day. If you're trying to stay thin and your limitations is 2,000 calories that day and you eat 4,000 calories that day, then you're evidently not going to be thinner the next morning. So there's the simplest way to put it to most neo-pros is you have to learn where your limitations are, and of course you have to learn to push the limitations from time to time to get better, to make yourself better, but you have to start with small increments and build them.
Well, that's great information. So for you, what has been the most pivotal moments in your career that you've learned from?
Oh man, my career is
I know it's huge, but do you have a few that stick
been
out?
a long time. I would say the biggest thing I did, of course, was you go back to 1996 at training camp when I'm in Fresno, California at the NutriFix house, and I was training 600-mile weeks or something. I'd go out with the guys training, and we'd do 70 miles that morning and come back. And then when I hopped on my bike later that afternoon, late in the afternoon, to do another 20 or 30 miles, they thought I was crazy. But when the first race came around and I started winning, then nobody complained if I trained extra again.
Oh, okay. So you learned early on to train hard and smart. I guess you just rode more, got some depth in your legs.
Yes, yeah.
Have you accomplished all of your goals yet?
Nobody ever accomplishes all their goals.
Well, in cycling, I mean, what are your goals? What are your next goals?
I'm satisfied with my goals if I had to retire this year, but I haven't accomplished all my goals. No athlete, there'd be no reason to still continue doing your job if you've accomplished all your goals. You might as well go home.
Well, that's a good answer. Well, what are some of your future goals? I mean, do you still want to win the Tour?
Yes, exactly. I still want to win anything. I still want to win California. I still would love to win Lombardy. I'd still like to win a World Championship. I'd like to win a stage of the Tour or win the Tour overall. I'd like to go back to the Basque Country and win the Basque Country again, and I'd like to come to California and dominate again. And so goals are never met, because once you achieve, especially as an athlete, it's quite funny, because when you're younger, you think, oh, okay, if I can get paid this amount of money, that'd be great. If I can get this kind of results, that would be great. If I can be on this pro team, that'd be great. And then when you arrive on the big pro team, now all of a sudden you don't want to be the pro team. You don't want to just be on the team. You want to be one of the leaders of the team, one of the most respected guys on the team. You want to be one of the best riders in the world. And those goals always change. Everybody knows in life, anyone that has a job, once they've reached a certain position in that job, they're no longer content to stay at that position. They want to go to management position. They want to go to the CEO position. They want to keep going. They want to own the company. So if you got anything less than that kind of desire, then you're probably not going to be a professional athlete if you're just content to say, well, okay, I just want to get on to a pro. I just want to do the Tour de France. That's it.
Right.
And so if that's the case, then once you reach that, then of course you're going to change the goal, because now all of a sudden it's not that special to do the Tour de France because you've done it. Now you want to win a stage at the Tour de France.
Right.
And after that happens, the next thing you know, you want to win the overall. So goals are always changing, if not throughout the year. It's from year to year for sure, but most of the time it's just changing throughout the year.
Well, what makes you, when you're a climber and you're one of the best riders in the world, so you've definitely achieved that. I'm sure that was one of your goals at one time. But what makes Chris Horner be able to suffer more than the next guy? Because, to us, we're watching it on TV, and, and I'll mention a race in the last Tour of California. I think Jens and the team did a great job in leading you out up that mountain. We thought you had it, and there you were, smiling, climbing. And, a guy comes by you, you look at him. I remember distinctly, you just look at him, you didn't change your rhythm. But what makes you be able to suffer more than the next guy?
Well, when we're on the climbs, probably I'm not suffering more than the next guy. I'm probably suffering less.
Yeah.
There's certainly moments, of course, throughout in your career where you're suffering as much, if not more, than other riders. Certainly, but I think that's especially when you go into the mountains. It's something that I do better than other riders, and so most of the time, I think most of my suffering, where I'm really suffering more than other riders, is when I'm in the time trial or you're on the flat crosswind stages or something like that. And that's sometimes when you're suffering a lot more than other riders, and you have to fight to get through those stages so you get to the stage that you don't suffer so much in as the mountains, because usually I'm quite comfortable on the mountain stages. And the only time I'm really suffering is maybe the end of the mountain stage when you're finally going with the best riders in the world. But when there's 50 guys left, when we're doing a Tour de France stage and there's 50 guys left and we're on the second to last climb, or there's 30 guys left, I'm not 100% still. I'm only 100% when we're finally down to 5 or 10 guys.
Right.
And then start being at 100%. So that's when I'm really suffering. But then it's easy to suffer because you know the finish is coming and you know you're with the best riders in the world, so it becomes a lot more easy. If I was suffering on the very first climb and there's 198 riders in the field still left, I probably couldn't make it to the finish with the front guys. So I would say there's other riders out there that certainly are suffering more than me when we're on the climbing stages.
Awesome. Well, do you have anything else to add? I really appreciate you joining us. I think I've covered just about everything, and I love talking to you, and I appreciate you being on Cycling Illustrated talking to us a little bit.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate coming on, and yeah, if you need anything else, give a holler. I'm always around. I don't always have a lot of free time, but I can always make some.